Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com. Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of the Mythic Cast. I'm your host Spencer and I'm joined by my co-host, my current favorite Magic TikToker, that no bias is here, Mythic Michaela. How's it going, Michaela?
I'm doing well. Hello everyone.
The one specifically that got me, well there's the two, the one you commented on, but the one where you're like flipping over the card and you're hoping that it's a rare wild card and it's a mythic wild card instead. That was so relatable. This is so relatable.
You know, that's why I'm on TikTok. Yeah. Relatable content.
Exactly. You know, we're joined by a guy that's pretty relatable in my opinion. Recently moved. You know, I'm pretty sure he got married like in the last couple of years. Just took a break from Magic. He's doing all the relatable things, and that's Awkward Andy from MTGO. Andy, how's it going?
It's a good day. Yeah, I've had a lot of big life things happen, and of course, some of those big life things include top 8ing every standard challenge I play.
Yeah, so you took a break this week. You know, gave other people a shot. What were you? You said you were 7 of 9 or 7 of 8 or something before that.
I lost on tiebreakers.
So I lost you for a second there. You took 12th twice and got on tiebreakers?
Yep. 11th twice, and the other 7 were top 8s.
And all of this is with Sultai?
8 of it's with Sultai, 1 is with Mono Black Vampires and Pioneer.
Oh, there you go. There you go. That's quite the comeback to Magic, Andy, I gotta say.
Yeah, so if anyone didn't know, I took a break for an entire year. I took almost exactly a full year off. I was preparing for my wedding, and I figured I should stop playing Magic for like a month or two to help my wife prepare for the wedding, because it's a pretty big deal, and I wanted to make sure that everything went well, and Magic was taking up a lot of my time, and I was having sort of a toxic attitude towards Magic. I was doing very well, but I couldn't really realize my success. Like, I was top 8ing a lot of PTQs, and I still just wasn't feeling good. And these PTQs are super tough events to top 8.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I decided that I think I need to take a break. If I'm doing really well, I know that I'm doing really well, but I'm still upset in the moment and not really having fun, that I think it was time to take a break. And honestly, it felt really good the whole time. And coming back just came super naturally, and it felt really good to come back, which is good because I really want to have fun playing Magic again, and that's exactly what happened after a 1-year break.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it, dude. We'll get a little bit more into kind of your journey and you know what prompted me to invite you onto the podcast. Before we do that, if you're an MTGO grinder like Andy, head on over to one of our sponsors, puremtgo.com, and check out the content over there. It's awesome. They also have their own sponsor that I plug like crazy. It is MTGO Traders. Michaela, you just got a pile of MTGO Traders books. Have you used them yet?
I have.
What did you get?
I'm actually working on getting a Adventures in the Forgotten Realms collection on MTGO.
Oh, nice.
And I cracked some Modern Horizons 2 packs.
That's awesome.
I need to feel something.
It's fine. Same thing. Digital. It doesn't smell the same, but it's the same thing. You can check out our other sponsor over at Grey Viking Games and use the link in our show notes, our affiliate link. It helps us out. We really appreciate it. If you want to support the podcast directly, head on over to patreon.com/mythicast. And wristbands are in. If you want to see them, there's an awesome picture of Michaela's son with them all the way up his arms. And it was funny when I showed my wife that, she laughed because Maxwell has done that about 1,000 times too, where he just like needs all of them up his arms. It's pretty funny. So we'll be updating the Patreon benefits to reflect those wristbands coming in, and we're also just giving them away. If you're tweeting with hashtag Ready for Battle or retweeting our podcast, you'll be entered to just win some wristbands. We're trying to give a ton of them out. Yeah, I think that's going to do it for the kind of the housekeeping. You can head on over to the Easy Game Media Discord, to submit your Mythic decks or tweet at us with hashtag Ready for Battle. Or just tweet at us. But let's get into you, Andy. I've been wanting to have you on a podcast for a long time, dude. Like, I think that your mindset, like even that glimpse of what you just gave, was really great. And really, I think it's funny. I think I tweeted either yesterday or the day before that, like, sometimes people need to realize that it's okay to not enjoy your hobby and to not do that thing. And I think as Magic players, we often feel like we have to. Like, we think that, like, we're losing value by not playing Magic at every second that we're not playing Magic. And I don't know. I really like your attitude about not falling for that trap.
Yeah, it's so easy, especially with a hobby that you really care about, to get drawn in and feel like because you've invested so much time and money that you have to keep at this hobby. But I think generating like a positive attitude towards it and making sure you have a positive experience is super important. So I think that's one of the reasons that I kind of make some decisions that might be negative EV or whatever, just because it makes me happier. So like sometimes I'll be in a tournament, and if I'm like 2-0 but I don't want to play anymore, I just want to go like hang out with my friends or play video games with my friends instead, I'll leave. I think it's okay to leave that kind of like fake equity on the table to be happier. I think people undervalue like how much, like, thankfully I'm in a position where I like don't need the equity that I could get from a tournament starting 2-0. But I just think try and do things to make you happy, and sometimes it's okay to sacrifice some EV for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Really quickly, just for the listeners, can you talk to me about kind of your Magic journey? Like, how did you start playing Magic?
I started playing Magic when I was around 19 years old. I had just graduated school. I was high school, and I was super competitive into football at the time, but I sustained like a pretty nasty injury that took me out of like any pursuing football any further. And so my friend one day was like, Andy, come draft Magic at this store. And I was like, I've never played Magic before. I'm absolutely not going to go draft at the store. And so what he did do was he like bought a bunch of like crappy cards, brought them home, and just was like, wanted to teach me how to play. And so he sat there and taught me how to play like his black vampires deck versus my green stompy deck. And I was like, I just really liked Magic. It was super fun. I liked the resources, and I liked winning, and I liked trying to win. And because I'm super competitive, it just kind of like naturally snowballed from there. I remember like getting a hold of my first Baneslayer Angel and putting it in my deck, and I was like, oh my god, this card's so good. Why don't I just buy 4? And so then you get 4 of them, and then from there on out, it was like tier 1 competitive decks the whole time I played Magic. And to put it in perspective of when I started when Rise of the Eldrazi came out. That was my first set.
That's the first Fat Pack I ever bought. All right, I'm gonna throw myself under the bus here. Have you been on this show before? Because I didn't think you had. Have you?
No, I haven't been on the show before.
I didn't think so. You're the second person to tell I got injured playing football, so my friend invited me to a draft, and got me hooked on the podcast. That's too.
I think it's sort. I can see like the correlation. It's like the competitive nature, and then like people who you bring on the show, I imagine, are people who kept playing Magic for a long time.
Yeah.
And they tend to be more competitive people. So there's a lot of overlap there between the competitive, like sports or competitive whatever you're doing, and Magic.
Yeah, I know I can really relate to that point too. That whole, like you were saying, that competitive mindset, like you never lose it, and you need to find that outlet.
Yeah, I agree. This isn't in the show notes, so it's okay if you don't have an answer to this. The next question we were going to ask you is what the biggest lesson you've learned in Magic is. But I'm actually kind of curious what translated from football into competitive Magic that you think gave you a leg up or helped you.
I would say the easiest thing is that so at the level of football I was playing, like a lot of people thought it was just like the physical things that you do that matter, but it was actually a lot of the preparation beforehand that mattered more, like getting the muscle memory of like exactly what you're supposed to do and that kind of thing, getting reps in, and that's completely related to Magic because you get better as you do the same things over and over again, and instead of gaining muscle memory of like an action or like what you're physically doing, you gain the muscle memory of like seeing a board state and understanding the situation because you've been there before. And so you get the same I've been here before, I know what to do from here thing that you get from competitive football and competitive Magic. So I think that is something that I would carry over from one to the other.
That's awesome. Do you think that there is a lesson outside of that Magic taught you that football didn't?
I think maybe like a social aspect of like inclusivity and how like wide a net Magic can cast.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty cool to see all these different people with different goals in mind in Magic. Instead of like for football, everyone has the same goal in mind, like beat the person that you're facing one-on-one or like win the game with your team. But in Magic, your goals can be different. Like my goal would be like win this tournament, go to the Pro Tour. Your goal might be like assemble card A and B, do this really cool thing. And both of those things are super valid and totally reasonable reasons to play Magic.
So it's interesting because you're kind of talking about Magic from not just Magic, but like competition from a micro and a macro standpoint. And I think that something that football is really good at that teaching is both of those things, right? You have this macro perspective that's over looming, right? You can win your micro in football and still lose the game. And the same thing is true in Magic. Like I can win an interaction, and if I put the wrong value on different micros, whether that's preparation, whether that's interactions in game, whether that's sideboarding, there's all of these micros that add up to your match or your tournament, right? And it's really funny because I actually think that football does that too, where people talk about playing team football or winning your matchup or doing your job if you're a Patriots fan. Like there are individual pieces that add up kind of this bigger thing. And the last person that I had on the show that talked about football, it was the same thing. It was like they had that kind of that same mindset you're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Like there's different ways to win in both. Like in football, you can win your one-on-one matchup, or you could, let's say you lose your matchup, but you win as a team. It doesn't take away from your victory. And if you win your matchup and lose as a team, it just kind of depends like what's more important to you. And sometimes it's totally fair and valid to like care more about your performance than the team's. Does that make you a bad teammate? Probably. But in Magic, you can want to have cool interactions more important than winning, or maybe your goal is to learn something about a matchup instead of winning. So I think you've kind of nailed it with the macro and micro of it all.
So now that our listeners have had a chance to meet you, Andy, I wanna kind of regroup as the three of us, and the point of this podcast and what we're starting to push is being ready for battle. It's funny that you mentioned football because I think that's typically you talk about that preparation, right? That those moments leading up to any given game or event, and how that translated into Magic. And I want to just spend a quick minute for Michaela and I to talk about what we did to get ready for battle this week. And it's okay if you don't have a moment to share because you were moving and stuff. But it would be interesting to know, if you have any changes or anything that you're making for upcoming Magic events or things like that. And Michaela, I'll let you go first. What did you do to get ready for battle this week?
Yeah, I had no events, but I did come here to discuss this deck with you and Andy. So I played some Sultai on ladder and worked on getting an understanding for the deck and just trying to see what it does. So
do you have any major takeaways that you want to bring up before we dive in, or do you want to save them?
The feelings I have, I would like to save.
No, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
I'll go next. We were not going to have Andy originally for the show, and then his tweet enticed me, and I just quickly text him. And before I text Andy, I had been playing. Michaela, is this a moment where I have to get out words to eat? Because I had been playing a ton of Naya Winota. But to be fair, I think my tech is sweet, Michaela. I think it's sweet.
It did sound sweet.
It's so good. So I was frustrated last week with Naya Winota, if you listen to the podcast. And one of my biggest frustrations is it just like one of the really cool things about Naya Adventures, for example, is that even though you have a bunch of like really dorky creatures, you have Showdown that just wins you games, right? And the problem is that you gain other incremental advantages with the creatures. Whereas in the Naya deck, the only advantages that you're really gaining are mana advantages. And the only thing you're casting with these mana advantages are Winotas. And so I was really struggling with like how I could fix that problem. And then it occurred to me to try and put oh my gosh, now I can't remember the name of the card. It's like we're cursed on this pot. What is the name of the card, Michaela?
Felidar Retreat?
Yes. It occurred to me to put Felidar Retreat in the sideboard. And then after I sideboarded it in one game, I was like, oh my gosh. This fixes literally all the problems. And I just started smashing with Felidar Retreat, and I owe Naya Winota an apology. The problems are fixable. The deck is not poo-poo garbage that I called it. And you all should try out Felidar Retreat in the deck. It goes really well with quite a few cards. I also added the 4-mana 3/4 that when it ETBs, you put a 1/1 counter on something. And if something with a 1/1 counter dies, you get a 2/2 knight. And so they're kind of all working conjunction with Winota by making 2/2s that can attack that aren't humans, as well as counters for it, and also I feel like I come on this podcast and I literally just forget the name of magic cards now. The 5-mana 5/5 with Wooburg activated abilities. Kenrith. See, now you're remembering those, so luckily we have you now, Michaela. But yeah, like Kenrith also puts counters on stuff, so it's good with that other card. So there was a lot more synergies once I kind of worked on the deck, and I was just wrong. And I like to admit when I'm wrong about a deck. And when I listened to other people talk about the deck and it did so well across multiple events, I scoured deck lists looking for like, what am I doing differently? Like, why am I losing with this deck? Why is my mana so bad and they're still winning? You don't fix the mana problems. I mean, not Naya Adventures had bad mana too, but yeah, that's kind of what I did. And then I have done nothing but play Sultai since then. So yeah. Anyway, Andy, did you do anything to get ready for battle this week?
Yeah, I did a lot of networking with people. I'm in like a big Magic online Discord with a bunch of like all the best moto grinders. And so there was just a lot of discussion about certain things about the format, what to play. And I think in the SCG, 3 of the 4 was Sultai, and 2 of the 4 in that top 4 was people from the Discord. And I think, yeah, just when you can't play, there's a lot of different things you could do. You could read a lot of deck lists, read some articles if that's your thing, watch some streams. But I just kind of like consumed a lot of content and engaged with a lot of people who I really respect their opinion on instead of playing a lot this week.
It's funny that you say that because I really miss that aspect of Magic. All of my friends that qualified for the Pro Tour with me as we came up and got better at Magic, they've all quit. And I really do need to find another community of people that have similar goals in mind to me, because it is, I don't know, it's something really special when you can, it is certainly the best part of PTQing was rooting for your friends, and I can see how that would be true on Moto right now too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm in a similar spot to you. Like, Locally, there's almost nobody who I know that really still plays Magic. So like locally for myself, I'm sort of isolated in that regard. But thankfully, I play like 99% of my Magic online,
Right.
and I think I've kind of gotten lucky to land in a group of a lot of people who were kind enough to invite me.
You probably earned your spot. Don't sell yourself short, Andy. Let's talk about your journey and how you got here. I mentioned a tweet here, and we kind of spoiled this first question, which is like, we usually invite people on that either got Mythic or did well in an individual event that we wanted to interview. But for our Mythic guest this week, it's just kind of amazing how well you've been doing with Sultai. It's pretty. I mean, I have never been like a hardcore moto grinder, but people in my play group were, and it is legitimately impressive what you've put together with this deck. So can you kind of talk about like the run you went on and how you kind of got there?
Yeah, for sure. So I quit Magic for a year, like I said, and I'm a huge lover of mid-range strategies or like unfair strategies. So when I decided on a whim to play the standard challenge, Sultai Ultimatum was very obviously right up my alley. It was a super mid-rangey deck, and it had sort of like an over-the-top thing to do. And that's one of my favorite things to do in Magic, is to make sure I have the thing that goes over the top of everyone else. So I just copy and pasted the first list I saw, played it in the challenge, and felt like I easily beat everybody in the challenge. And I think I lost in top 4 of the first one. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This deck's absolutely insane. Like, I have no reps. I'm playing terribly, but I'm still doing well. And then so for the Sunday challenge, I just ran back the exact same thing and missed out on tiebreakers on top 8. So I finished 4-2 in the standard challenge and finished 11th. And so I was feeling pretty high on the deck. I thought it was awesome. And so from there, I decided to do what I usually do when I start doing well with the deck, is you start tweeting about it and networking with a bunch of people and giving away free information in exchange for clout. And that's exactly what I did. As I started tweeting like, I'm crushing everybody with this deck, I think this deck's crazy. And then I got to back it up with the next week, where I did the exact same thing. I top 8'd the challenge, and then I lost in the first round of that top 8, and then came 11th again. And so I was like, look, everyone, I'm telling you, this deck's crazy. It's insane. Here's my exact list. And then people kind of really wanted to know like more and more of my thoughts on the deck, because I was doing so well. Standard was a bit stale, so there's not a lot of standard content out there. And so I just kept pushing it out. And then the week after, I top 8'd both tournaments. And actually the first tournament I top 8'd, I posted my deck list, said like, my deck list is very good. Trust me, it's insane. And then the next day, in the Sunday challenge, there was 3 of my exact 75 in the top 8, including myself. And it just kept going from there. And then I don't want to keep rambling, but it feels like rambling. But then the next week, I top 8'd both again, and losing in the finals to someone who played my exact 75 from the week before. And then I tried to spice it up a bit. I like played some new tech, trying to like explore Sultai, because I thought I shouldn't just play the exact same 75 like 5 times in a row. I should at least pretend that I'm trying. And so I added what's that card called? It's the Big Giant.
Beanstalk Giant?
I added that card to my deck, and it actually performed pretty well.
Like over like a single cultivate, or like how did you?
I played 2 Beanstalk Giants over not cultivates. I played all 4 cultivates.
I was saying cultivate's like one of the best cards in the deck, so
I wanted to play 10 ramp spells in the deck. I thought it would give me a decent edge in the mirror and let me go 3 to 5 for 3 Shadows Verdicts, I think I was playing at the time. So that was like my game plan, because of the way the metagame was at the exact time. But in the end, I think Beanstalk Giant is better served as like more 2-mana removal or more counter spells.
Sure.
So I did end up going back after the Beanstalk Giant nonsense. It just felt like whatever I did, it didn't matter. I top 8'd it. The deck was better.
Yeah. What do you think that your biggest kind of takeaway was from this run?
So a lot of the data kept saying that Sultai was really bad. Like tons of it was saying that it was really bad. And I kept in the Discord being like, listen, I don't know what to tell you. I think everyone's just playing it bad. I think people are mulliganing terribly because I think that's basically the most important thing with the deck. Cards is that mulliganing is so much more important in an 80 card deck. And I think people were just doing it wrong because all these matchups that people were telling me were terrible, I was still just beating the crap out of them. And I know that it could be a small sample size, but the games just didn't feel that bad. And when people were telling me matchups were really bad, just didn't believe them. And then Sultai just came right back. But thankfully, this metagame is like so fluid that I think Sultai will fall out and in of favor. But I think it is still super tunable as a control deck for whatever metagame.
You know, you said 3 things that I want to touch on, but I want to ask Michaela a question first. Michaela, I had a bad win percentage to start with this deck, and I think in my last, I don't know, 14 matches or so, I'm like well above 90%. And I definitely fell for the trap of bad mulligans, misunderstanding sequencing, misunderstanding what the deck was about originally. I'm curious, you know, what your experience was if you had to kind of adjust to the importance of both sequencing and mulliganing in this deck too.
Yeah, I can definitely see how mulliganing is important for the specific matchups. So my experience was I didn't lose with the deck except for one matchup where I was playing against Dimir Control, and game 1 I didn't see an emergent ultimatum, and I had 36 cards left in my deck. So
that's fair. I also, to be fair, I have not played against blue-black control in the last, however many matches, but I actually do have a text in my group chat where I'm like, it's actually about Winota, and it says, how is blue-black control not like one of the best decks in the format? Like, it beats Sultai, it beats Winota, it beats like a bunch of random stuff. So maybe we'll have to pick Andy's brain about blue black, but yeah,
Sultai cannot beat blue black. I'll tell you that for free.
Okay, so, all right, cool. Because I didn't think I could either.
Yeah, I actually do want to touch on that. So I know when I was playing against blue black, one thing I was noticing is like I felt like I wanted a negate for that matchup, and there's no negate in the 75.
Yeah, you sure do want negate in that matchup, but basically you can actually see if you go like week to week on my deck list, you can see there's one tournament where I lost round 1 of the standard challenge to blue black and then lost in the top 4 to the exact same person playing blue black. And then if you look at my deck list the next day, it has 4 duress, 4 of the 2 mana artifact that draws cards, and disdainful strokes. So you can see how I like the blue black did pick up popularity for like a week and a half. Like really big popularity.
I actually played against
doing pretty well.
I'm pretty sure that I played against the list that you just said 3 times today. The Sultai list that you said. So I actually, if we're going to talk about blue black for just a second before we move on to the next question, I want to talk about. I have started tuning your deck for like a Sultai list that I liked, and one of the cards that I thought about negate too. But I really wanted test for tactics for a couple of reasons. One of them actually was duress out of blue black. I like that card is just a beating when they get to like kind of crush you with that. And obviously you have your own duresses. But I kind of liked it over negate, and I was curious both of your opinions on is it test of tactics, test of talents? Holy crap! Michaela's TikTok is truer by the second. But yeah, test of talents. The card's been great for me. Like legitimately, one of the best cards of my 75. I was curious to hear his opinions.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable play.
You can go first, Michaela. Yes.
I don't have a ton to say about that card, but because I've not played it a whole bunch, but I understand where you're coming from with that. So
I'm pretty sure it's terrible, if you want my opinion.
Just because.
And I played it a bunch, and I think it's just too narrow because there's so many things that you want to counter that are like the 2-mana artifact doesn't counter that, and like if you do manage to like nab something important, that's great. But it also doesn't back up your spells well enough, like getting to cast something with protection.
Yeah, I don't know that like I'm that worried about Maze Mind Tome with Sultai. Maybe I'm wrong, but the thing is that if they're spending 2 mana to draw cards, it means that they're not putting things on the board, which means that my deck's just gonna beat them anyway. And if all they're doing is scrying 4 and gaining 4 life for 2 mana, I think I'm okay with that. I don't know.
I think the card advantage from that card is really hard to come back from if they're playing counterspells in their deck.
Oh, out of blue black specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just can't beat that.
That's interesting.
I see my strategy against that was playing a Binding of the Old Gods.
Yeah, me too, but maybe I mean, you also just have so many bad cards against them, and your divination, while is insane against them, is probably not. I'm talking about cultivate, by the way. Is probably not as good as raw cards, which I can see where Andy's coming from there.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. Okay.
It's close because like when cycling was good, I think it had some more merit because cycling is also almost unwinnable for Sultai because you just don't put a lot of pressure on them.
So I have brought it in that matchup because I have played against cycling, which is one of the reasons that it was probably good for like better for me. So that makes sense. Yeah, I like.
The problem is it's like not good enough against rogues though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't lose to rogues because I refuse to, but maybe. I mean, also I just think that rogues has a hard time with Polukranos overall.
They do. It is a bad matchup though.
So I lost to it the first 2 times I played against it, and then I started beating it when I kind of changed. It's kind of like you said earlier, and maybe this will bring me to the next point that I had on what you were saying. You talked about this being a control deck, and it's kind of funny because I've always enjoyed these ramp control decks, basically, like these, whether it's Wolf Run Ramp was a ramp control deck, this is a ramp control deck. There's been plenty of Temur ramp control decks. Like these are the style of ramp decks that I really enjoy, and I think it's because they play out like control decks. And you get to pivot whether you want to be the ramp deck in a matchup, the control deck in a matchup, and I really like having both of those options. I'm curious, you just talked about how Rogue's is a bad matchup, and on paper, it should just crush Sultai. But it's felt pretty close to like 50-50. I actually should have pulled up a matrix for this, but well, you want to talk about that for a second?
Like the matchup in particular?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So the problem is that you have like, so I started playing like 7 2-mana removal spells, but the problem is so many of their creatures like backed up with counter spells. If they ever have an aggressive start backed up with like 2 to 3 counter spells, you're dead. You just can't win almost no matter what you do.
Yeah, the thief, the 1/1 that mills 2 whenever a rogue enters the battlefield. If they delver you out with that card, you're gonna lose. But that's kind of true of every matchup for them, right?
To an extent, for sure. I think you're in particular vulnerable to it because the way the games are going to play out is you're going to have like on average 1 or 2 cheap spells against them the whole important part of the match in the early game. Everything after that, you're tapping out. Like
Sure.
big time, like 4 mana, 5 mana, 7 mana. And so like they can kind of wait. And it's just so brutal. And if they ever catch you twice, like 2 counter spells will beat you a lot. Just 2.
Have you thought of playing a main deck Cling to Dusk in your deck for that matchup?
Yeah, my first top 8 had a main deck Cling to Dusk.
Oh, okay. Because it seems really good in that matchup specifically, as well as some other stuff. So I thought I'd ask. Cool.
Yeah, the card's close to being good enough. It's still just not quite there, honestly, in my opinion. Like the matchup, I think now that I'm playing 7 2-mana removal and 3 Polukranos as opposed to the 2 that people were playing, and I actually went to 1 at some point. That I think it's close, but you're just unfavored, and I can take that with the other matchups in the format.
Should we get into the deck tech?
Yeah, I was gonna say I was looking over I was like, man, we've like kind of answered most of these questions. I think the one thing that we might want to ask him before we move into the deck tech is there any other decks you've considered in standard since you came back, or just why is there a reason to when you're Andy Awkward playing Sultai?
Yeah, I almost played a Teamer Luca because it's also a similar style deck that I like a good mid-range strategy that tries to go over the top with like Luca into the coma. But I just didn't think the deck was quite powerful enough, and I had a very bad Sultai matchup, and I just preferred to play on Sultai. I also think like the Gruel Magda decks are very good,
Yeah, they seem strong.
and Winota is just a very good deck. And like when people started playing more of the 4-mana, I don't know what the card is exactly. It's like a 4-mana 4/4 vehicle that makes 2/2/2s.
Oh yeah, Chariot.
Because Chariot.
That card's ridiculous. It's unbelievable against Sultai. It's one of the best possibles.
It's so funny. When that card was previewed, I text former co-host of Constructor Criticism. He's now works for Wizards, Michael Hinderocker, and I was like immediately like, Michael, is this good? Is this good? This is a cat chariot. This is a chariot mate that's taken by kitties. And he's like, I think it's sweet and maybe good. And I was like, yay. So I think that card's sweet. Okay. I actually think that decks like Gruel would suit you well from what I've seen of you in the past, so that makes sense. Yeah, Michaela, do you want to kind of kick off, or do you want me to read the deck? Do you want to read it? Either way.
You can read the deck.
Awesome. I'm going to switch over for those viewing at home, and the reason that I'm mentioning this for the viewers is, man, it's so hard to get a picture of a Urion deck on the screen for the video podcast. Oh my gosh. If you go to Goldfish, it's too long. If you go to Arena, it's too wide. If you try to make one yourself, it takes too long. So, just wanted to complain about that for a second. First world problems. But yeah, so I assume that this is your updated list. This is the one that you sent me, your 5th place list, Andy. So if there's something that's changed, feel free to just interrupt me or correct me at the end of the main deck. Happy to hear that out. So we do have the companion Urion. We have 1 Valky, 3 Plurkinos, 3 Elder Gargaroth, 1 Vorin Klex, 2 Disdainful Stroke, 4 Heartless Act, 2 Jawari Disruption. Oh man, I am so blind. I'm sorry, fam. 3 Power Word Kill, 4 Cultivate, 1 Extinction Event, 2 Shadow's Verdict, 2 Uldred's Epiphany, 4 Emergent Ultimatum, 1 Seagate Restoration, 4 Omen of the Sea, 4 Wisp-Willow Haven, 1 Elspeth's Nightmare, 4 Binding of the Old Gods, and 1 Kiora Best the Sea Gods. There are 33 lands in addition to those 3 double-face cards. We have all 12 of the flip lands in Sultai, 4 Fabled Passage, 3 Forest, 3 Islands, 1 Ketria Triome that lost me a game because I definitely thought it was the other Triome, 2 Swamp, 4 Temple of Malady, and 4 Zagoth Triome. Is that the main deck correct still?
Yeah, I think the only thing is like there's a couple flex things. You could add another what's the 2-mana counterspell that is also a land?
Oh, the Jawari's Disruption, sure.
That card is very good.
Yeah, I
think you could play more.
I actually.
So I only play against the people who play around that card.
That's crazy because that card has been counterspell for me 100% of the times it's been in my hand, and I was gonna tell Andy that he's a genius for playing Censor right now.
Oh, it's always a counterspell against me, but I don't hold it in my hand. But my opponent plays around it all day long. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, so a couple things I've been trying recently in the main deck is the 4-mana -3/-3 to all creatures except for a type. Because basically what's been happening is my extinction events have not been doing the job. against Winota in particular. So you could kind of consider cutting the Elspeth's Nightmare, probably cutting the Extinction Event for a couple of those. I think that's probably where I'm at right now.
Sorry, what was the card? I must have missed it.
I'm so terrible with names. It's a 4 mana and it's -3/-3 to all
Oh,
creatures.
sure. Yeah, it's okay. Michaela and I do this all the time.
Is it Crippling Fear?
Oh, that's the -2/2 for 3 mana.
Maybe it is.
I want to say this is like Witches something.
This is classic Mythic Cast.
It's Crippling Fear.
Oh man, Andy on top of it. I'm really glad you said that. I before we get into key card, well, I'll save my question for later. Maybe I'll forget it, but I'll save it. What can you kind of talk to me about kind of the top 3 key cards really quick for the deck?
Well, yeah, it's Emergent Ultimatum is the most important card. The second most important card is probably Cultivate. And the third most important card is probably that's a tough one to exactly nail. I would guess it's just a combination of the Pelucranos, Elder Gargaroth, like the threats. Those are the most important things kind of going on.
Yeah, I love your top 2. I think that this is an Emergent Ultimatum deck, and I'd love to take a second to talk about Cultivate, because Cultivate is actually probably in like, I don't know, my top 20 favorite Magic cards ever printed. And this is one of the better Cultivate decks I've played. Like, you don't have to do a lot to convince me to play a Kodama's Reach, and this one's real good. What do you think? I mean, we kind of mentioned that this is kind of this deck's divination, but it's so much more than that. When you have a card like Emergent Ultimatum that is green, black, blue. This card pulls a lot of weight, and I was hoping you could kind of talk about that.
Yeah, 100%. The deck would be absolutely unplayable without Cultivate. It's not even remotely close. Like, let's say there's a world where Cultivate doesn't exist, but you have like Beanstalk Giantess 3 mana ramp, not playable, because the extra card and the extra land matter so much in so many matchups, because basically you have so many good plays before Ultimatum that are like 5 and below that can keep you in games. And so all you need to do is like hopefully interact on turn 2 and turn 3 Cultivate, and you're a favorite against almost everything if you interact on 2 and Cultivate on 3. And that's because you have your 5th land drop rolled up. And so I think it's just one of the best Cultivate decks for sure. And it really helps with the mana, because Emergent Ultimatum is not an easy card to cast. It has super strict requirements. So even if it was like get a forest, it might not be good enough.
So you mentioned mulligans earlier being pretty important. So are you really looking to have that Cultivate in your opening hand?
Yes, definitely. So basically, I'll break down how I mulligan with the deck really quickly. Is you always check to see their companion. If it's a Yorion, you have to have a ramp spell or counter spell. Otherwise, you mulligan. That's the rule. You have to also keep in mind your threats basically stuck against them. So you basically, all you care about is a ramp and a counter spell. If you have one of those, good. If you have 2, fantastic.
Can we put a caveat on that, just out of curiosity? What if your ramp spell is binding?
No.
That doesn't count in that
doesn't
match.
Count.
Okay. I just wanted to check.
Nope. And so against, like, if they show no companion, you're pretty safe to assume they're an aggro deck. And so from there, what you really want is you need to have a turn 2 removal spell or a turn 2 way to interact. On the plays, Royal Disruption counts. On the draw, it sometimes doesn't count unless you already have a Wrath in your hand. And your game plan is just to make sure you know what you're going to do the first 3 turns. It's like turn 2 removal, turn 2 interact, turn 3 ramp, or turn 4 threat. Like if you have a turn 4 Wrath lined up, that's okay. So basically, that's the easiest way to mulligan when you don't see a companion. If you see a Lurrus, the thing you want the most, I think, is probably ramp and a 2 mana removal. So it's like really, that's why because it's rogues for sure.
Or it's that stupid blue-white deck for what it's
I've never played against it, so I don't
I
know
lost
what
to
it
all that glitters twice, and I was like about ready to throw my laptop against the room, against the wall.
is. Yeah, so if they show Aluris, you really have to have a lot of goods, like the goods against them, which is why the matchup's so tough, is you have to have a combination of removal to kill that first threat, maybe 2 removal spells to kill the first 2, or like removal and ramp. You can't just survive on just ramp against them, because they'll counter everything you play after that and kill you. So that's part of the reason why that matchup is so tough. And I don't think there's any other companions to reveal.
Yeah, the only other one is Giganta, and
If that means Rakdos, right? And that
yeah,
deck
and
is
that's Rakdos.
easiest matchup imaginable.
I feel like there's one other deck that uses.
Oh yes,
Teamer,
Teamer,
yeah.
yes.
Oh, does it? Does it?
Wait, no,
did they go
Teamer
back?
Can't play that, right?
Did they go back to?
Because
did they go back to Obosh?
There's like 10. There's like 10 versions. They switch back and forth.
I
think the last time I played it was Teamer, or was the Giganta.
Oh, is there a Teamer deck playing? I actually might have played against a Teamer Giganta deck too.
Yeah.
But I do think that what he's saying is true, that you're just favored against Giganta with this deck. I have a question about, you just mentioned something in the blue-black matchup. You mentioned that they're counter every spell against again after you ramp, if you just have ramp. And I'm curious, if you have the option to like kill a crab or kill a soaring sky thief versus cultivate, which do you do in the early game?
It depends on the number of cards in my graveyard, and if I think I can prevent 8 cards in my graveyard for a couple turns. If I think I can, then I'll just kill their spell. If I think I can't, then I'll just cultivate.
So if you think that you can prevent 8 cards, you're gonna kill the crab or you're gonna kill the mill creatures.
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
Moving on to the mana base. So I know a situation I ran into against like Dimir Control was my Ketria Trio being destroyed. So what are your takes on the mana base, and have you seen any need to have another like red source in the deck?
Some people play a black-red pathway in the deck, and you can do that. I just think it comes up so seldom to want to... you cast Valky like that so seldom that I think it's okay to just get away with the Ketria Triumph. There's so few Field of Runes out there. I'm fine taking the L if they kill my Ketria Triumph and I draw Valky. I'll just cast it for 2 mana.
I'm not gonna lie, I had never even realized why there was a red land in the deck until this exact moment with Binding of the Old Gods. Holy crap!
Yeah, you fetch it with Binding all the time. Like
holy crap! I'm an idiot. Anyway, I cannot believe how many matches I've won in a row with this deck. Or what my win percent. Wow, Michaela's so much better at Magic than me. Okay, man, I now want to play again. That's so interesting to me. I am curious about something else though, about the mana base. This deck doesn't have. One of the reasons that I find that I mulligan so much with the deck is like I need to make sure that I can create the proper mana for the proper turns, rather than just have the right mana. It's not hard for this deck to get to the right mana by turn 4, but I need the right mana in the right spots. And the deck plays so many tap lands. And it's funny, right? Because you would think that, you have enough 2-mana removal spells to kind of catch up from that. But I actually don't know if that's true. Like, I don't think you can keep a 3 tap land hand with this deck very often in the dark. And I'm kind of curious your thoughts on that.
I would say you can virtually never keep a 3 tap land hand. And just mulligan. This deck's really good at mulliganing. It has a 7 mana I win the game card.
Yeah.
Just mulligans. It's okay.
It does have kind of those like 5 free cards, right? You got Cultivate to bring you back from a mulligan, plus Urion is just a free get me back from a mulligan too. But I'm curious, do you think that there's a weakness in this mana base, or do you think that kind of, Cultivate and Binding kind of solve those problems?
Like, if you're really worried about the tap lands, I think it's like fair that you could cut a temple. But I just think I think you're okay with it, with the amount of 2 mana plays you have. to just accept that sometimes you're going to play a tap land on turn 3. And that's okay. I think you need the mana base to be consistent at casting Ultimatum on the 7th mana source, that you have to accept your fate when it comes to that kind of stuff. You can't try and like bleed your mana base thin by trying to make it come into play on tap more. You're just going to lose more games.
Yeah.
I will say, even though there are quite a few tap lands, like every game that I had, it felt intuitive how I was supposed to play the lands.
That's true.
Hasn't always felt that way.
There's lots of great times to play a tap land. There's just tons of great times because of the way your spells cost.
Yeah, it's kind of like reminds me of another ramp deck. It might have been like the Hour of Promise ramp decks, where like you had 2 drops and 3 drops, and you were either playing odds or evens depending on how your hands played out. And this kind of reminds me of that. I don't know if that makes sense. I have one more thing about the lands before our next question, which is, can you kind of talk about basic lands in the deck and how with Cultivate plus with Cultivate plus Binding plus Fable Passage, is there some sequencing thoughts that you have around your mana base, including your basics?
I think the best thing I can touch on about that is just to keep in mind that you'll fetch for a lot of islands because of the black-green temple doesn't tap for blue, and sometimes you'll want triple blue for turns with Yorion and Omen, or casting the Seagate. That I think I fetch a lot of islands, and I don't fetch a lot of forests because Willowhaven produces an extra green. Almost every land in your deck produces green. So that's the only thing I can really think of that's like kind of relevant, is to make sure you get to double blue, because I think that's the least natural color to get.
No, I think that's totally fair, and I completely agree. What do you think the coolest interaction in this deck is?
Coolest interaction is definitely like Vorinclex and Valky, or Vorinclex and Liliana if you play that. So when I first started playing the deck, I didn't even I top 8'd the first tournament and had no clue why Vorinclex was in the deck. I thought it was in the deck as a 6/6 haste, and then someone against me ultimated Valky, and I was like, oh god, what have I been doing this whole time? And now it's like a key part of a lot of piles. So Vorinclex and Cure's Best to Sea God is awesome, especially in the mirror, because then they can't binding you. And I would play against a lot of like mono white decks who were trying to get the what's that angel thing? The angel thing on the Faceless Haven to make it can't lose the game.
Yeah, that deck's bad. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
Well, you can't get counters on stuff.
Right.
So it stops that, and also it stops like Elspeth Conquer's Death, one of their best cards against you.
It's funny because I also have started to make my first piles in the mirror Vorinclex piles, because it means that they can't Best the Sea Gods or Valky you in their piles if that's one that they pick. So, if you make a pile with extra turn Vorinclex and then either Sea God or your own Valky, you're like pretty favored there, because you either get an extra turn with a Valky or a Sea God, or you get, yeah. Anyway, so I agree. Go ahead.
If I have 2 planeswalkers, I'll include Vorinclex in both the planeswalkers in my first pile in the mirror. But I really hesitate to put it in my first pile in the mirror without 2, because let's say I give you Time Walk and that, and I have untapped mana, and I just kill your Vorinclex. Your ultimatum is pretty bad. That's about one of the worst ultimatum outcomes you can get. Is them killing your thing very easily and you get a Time Walk. But obviously you could have more to do after.
Yeah.
But that's certainly a way you can win in the mirror, is just give them that, kill it, and then you have yours later when everyone's out of resources.
Yeah. Yeah, the understanding how to do your piles seems really important in the mirror, and understanding how your Vorinclex interacts with their piles, as well as, you talked about the 2 Planeswalker things. One of the things that I changed in your deck list, and we actually talked about it, I think, early on this podcast, was or maybe it was right before, the Professor Onyx, the Liliana I think that, depending on how you want to build your deck, you have a lot of options on your piles depending on the type of things you're willing to play.
Yeah, Liliana certainly makes your mirror pile just clean and easy. You just get Vorinclex, Liliana, Valky, and it's like almost unbeatable. But I think the mirror had become so seldom for me, like during that period of time, is why I cut it.
Well, don't worry, buddy. You fixed that problem all by yourself, and I literally just played an event with nothing but the mirror.
It's a good deck.
7 rounds of the mirror.
Ugh.
You know what, though? It actually wasn't as bad. Maybe it's because I went, or 6 rounds of the mirror. Maybe it's because I went 5-1, because I had played the mirror so much that I really felt like I had a grasp on it while my opponents didn't. But, yeah. Should we move on to the sideboard, Michaela? You want to read that off for us?
Yeah, so sideboard includes 4 Duress, 1 Disdainful Stroke, 1 Elspeth's Nightmare, 3 Mystical Dispute, 1 Pestilent Haze, 2 Karavik the Spiteful, and 2 Coma Cosmos Serpent. So, Andy, do you want to give us a high-level overview of where these cards are coming in, what cards are coming out?
Yeah, so first is Duress is the best sideboard card in the deck, and it's not remotely close because it's the best thing to bring in against all your bad matchups. The other thing is, against a lot of decks, I'm trying to think of good examples. So against the mirror, for example, you take out almost all your removal because the assumption is that your opponent's going to take out almost all their Elder Gargaroths because they're so bad, and most their Pelucanos, and so your removal is going to kind of stink.
Fun fact, I started keeping in Elder Gargaroth in the mirror because I knew my opponents didn't have removal.
Yeah, well, I have 3 Disdainful Strokes.
That's fair. I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying, sometimes, you just need a 6/6 to win the game. I'm actually really interested in the mirror sideboarding plan and talking to you about it. So keep going.
The mirror sideboarding plan is take out almost all your removal, take out every single Wrath, take out most most Gargaroths, and take out most Pelucanos. And you bring in Coma, you bring in Disdainful Stroke, Duress, and I was even bringing in Elspeth's Nightmare as a 5th Duress.
Yeah, let me actually. I want you to dissect my sideboard plan really quick, live on the air. Just go as mean as you want, Andy. So I've been boarding out 4 Heartless Acts. This would change depending on what they were playing in the mirror, but usually it was the 2 Shadow's Verdicts, the 3 Power Word Kills, and I would leave in the Extinction Event for certain piles.
Totally reasonable.
And then I would board, and then often it would be board out 1 Pelucranos. And then I would board in. For me, it was 3 Duress, 1 the 2 mana counterspell that we mentioned earlier in the podcast.
The talents.
Yeah. Board in a Disdainful Stroke. Oh, I'm sorry. I also boarded out the Elspeth's Nightmare in the mirror because it's terrible. 3 Mystical Disputes came in, and then the 2 Serpents.
That seems totally fine.
But it sounds like you board out one of the bindings and leave in a Heartless Act or 2 or Power Word Kills.
I usually will keep in 1 to 2 Power Word Kills, and I'll definitely keep in the Extinction Event.
Okay.
Just because a lot of the time games will come down where you can give them Cure Best the Sea God and Time Walk, and then you can wrath the whole board.
Yeah.
So I think that comes up often enough that you can take away a lot of their threats with one Extinction Event.
Yeah, Extinction Event being able to kill the Kraken seemed really important.
Yeah, I agree.
Are you boarding that? I mean, that leads me to the question: are you boarding out some number of the enchantment, the Binding of the Old Gods? What am I missing here that you're boarding out?
So I board out. Let's say with this deck list, I would board out 2 Pelucanos, 2 Elder Gargaroth.
It's a Pelucanos then. Okay.
Okay.
And the Elder Gargaroths. That makes sense.
I just think Elder Gargaroth is good to put in some piles, but just not strong enough.
Sure. That makes sense.
You just can't afford to cast it very often for the way the games play out. Which is one of the reasons I actually bring in an Elspeth's Nightmare is just as a delayed duress, because duress matters so much for how you get to play. Because the way the turn plays out, it's like if you cast this on like 6 mana, for example, you can cast it, and then when you get to 7 mana, you duress them for free on that turn.
So it's so funny that you're saying this, because like multiple games that I had today in this event, where my opponent played Elspeth's Nightmare, it did nothing, and it gave me something to kill with the Binding of the Old Gods in the Mirror that I wouldn't have had before.
Yeah, I just take the L on that. I'm okay with that.
Okay. What other? I mean, we talked about the Mirror, but you want to talk about some of the other sideboard plans?
Yeah, I think the most interesting one is like against rogues. I take out all the ultimatums and the whole ultimatum package, and just bring in like Comas as my 7-drop, and like the Mystical Disputes, the Elspeth's Nightmare, the Forward Arrest, the Pestilence Haze.
That's so different than what I was doing, because I was only boarding out one ultimatum in that matchup, but I actually love the idea of boarding out all of them.
Just can't afford to cast it, and then you also get to cut like Vorinclex, who just sucks against them, really.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It also makes sense why you're so high on duress too, in specifically moments like that.
Yeah, I just think like duress is just so good against rogues. It's so good, and so good in the mirror. It's like nothing's better in the mirror. Nothing's better against rogues. Super cheap interactive spell that lets you resolve your spells. That's all you want to do against both those matchups.
So I think that if we asked people, Michaela, let me know if you disagree with this. If we asked people what the 3 best decks in Standard were right now, we'd probably get the answer, or let's say 4. If we asked people the 4 best decks in Standard right now, I think that we would get the answer of Sultai, Gruel, and Naya, and then maybe some people say Is It Dragons as like kind of the honorary 4th mention, but I think that deck's fallen off, kind of like Mono Green's fallen off a little bit. So I'm curious how you approach those 3 matchups. I mean, we already talked about Sultai, so I'm curious how you approach like the Naya deck and the Gruel deck. Does that sound right to you, Michaela?
Yeah, and the Gruel deck was definitely something that popped up this past weekend as a response to Winota.
Yeah.
Yeah, the best decks are definitely Gruel, Winota, maybe Naya Adventures. I'm not a believer. Rogues and Sultai. Those are the 4 to me.
I think it's
I'm
hard.
not a believer in.
I'll give a hot take. I think it's hard to imagine playing Naya right now over Gruel, just with like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you could. The mana's just so much worse. I just don't think there's a reason, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, the mana's worse, and I don't know. Embercleave's insane. I guess both can play Embercleave, but
yeah,
I just think the red-green decks are so clean.
Just for reference, this isn't a Power Rankings episode, but the top deck right now on Goldfish is Naya, followed by Dimir, followed by Sultai, followed by it's crazy, followed by Dragons, followed by Mono Green, and Gruel doesn't even come in, but they also count a month worth of data. They also count a month's worth of data versus only counting, the last like 2 weeks, right? So
there's so many events that Goldfish just doesn't count anymore.
Oh, yeah, is that? Go ahead.
I'm gonna go pull up last weekend's SCG, because
there you go. That's much better.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I would. That's what we would do if it was a Power Rankings episode. Yeah. But yeah, talk to us about Naya really quick.
So that matchup's getting like a lot of love from me when it comes to my choices going forward, because that deck is actually just very good. That's one of the reasons I teched to play Disdainful Stroke last week, is because it countered all the best cards against you from Naya and Gruel. It was good in the mirror and countered the best card against you from Rogues, while I will admit that it is bad against Rogues. And I just thought that Disdainful Stroke is a good place to be right now. And the sideboarding is like pretty simple. It's just you take out trying to think exactly what I would take out. Against Naya Winota, I would probably take out, see what I have to bring in. I get to bring in 2 Karvik, 1 Pestilence Haze, and that's it. So I would take out the Elspeth's Nightmare because it's too slow. I would take out like 1 Ultimatum, and then I would take out just like a couple other random cards. It doesn't really matter. It's just for taste, really. Binding is kind of bad against them, honestly, because the wolf. That's one of the pup, whatever, the sacrifice indestructible thing. That's one of the reasons why I started playing the -4/-4. Is that card is ridiculous.
Can
You
we
mean the
talk
-3,
Karavik?
-3?
Yeah, sorry.
So yeah, the -3/-3. Right, yeah. But the Karavik. So my experience playing against the Winnow deck was I wasn't finding that I was wanting that card. I felt like I had enough spot removal against the deck, and I just really wasn't worried about their cards that the Karavik was gonna take care of.
I actually had the same experience for what's worth, Michaela. Like, Karavik was like probably the worst of my wraths, and also like I don't know, it didn't seem very good. And also, I played the Naya side of this matchup quite a bit. I don't know that Karavik is like kind of where I want to be. So I'm more interested in hearing your thoughts on that -3/-3 card in the matchup. Actually,
I love that card right now. I think it's probably taken the spot of Karavik for me also lately. Karavik has been a little bit weak. Well, it has been super strong some other times. I'm also playing like the Rave Enfeeblement now, a few of those.
okay.
I think it's pretty important right now.
I actually don't know what the card is. What is that card doing?
It costs black and it gives a creature -4/-1,
Oh.
or if it's white, -4/-4.
Yeah,
It's the Gruel tech.
definitely lost to that card with Naya a couple times. That
Like
makes
By the
Gruel
Gruel
deck.
tech, that's the tech and Gruel for the Naya deck.
Oh, because
stopped playing
of the
Disdainful
Jund
Stroke.
version, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense. That's good tech.
They also play Valkyrie, which is cool.
Yeah, I was actually gonna bring that up. This is the perfect time. Reed was streaming that today. The Valky Ray version of this deck. Is this the new hotness in standard? Also, can we let's actually rewind even more. I need you guys' opinions because people got mad at me for saying this is like one of, if not the best standard formats of all time. Like this specific large standard format. This format's insane.
I think this standard format's very good.
Michaela is not happy.
I also come from the point of view where I didn't play against Sultai Ultimatum for like a year straight, right? I quit for a year.
Sure.
And so I come into the standard format. There's like 4 to 5, maybe 6 decks that I would consider playable, maybe even 7. And what's best changes every week. And I don't know what more you could possibly want from a standard format. And I think the decisions are pretty interesting and cool.
I want a Sun Titan. I want to bring back some dead weights for my graveyard.
I was going to say, you just want a phantasmal image of Sun Titan? That's what you want?
That's what I want.
Yeah, I remember that deck as the Doomblade for Geist of Saint Draft.
Yeah.
Back then, Geist would kill Geist if you played a Geist.
You could also Sun Titan and put a deadweight on Geist.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's too funny. That's too funny. Okay, and then talk. We kind of talked about a lot of these, but you want to talk about Gruel before we wrap up?
Gruel is like almost the exact same game plan as Naya, so I actually think Gruel's a pretty damn good matchup. All you have to do is just not get cleaved. That's the only thing that matters in that matchup, in my opinion. And like, Elder Gargaroth is really good against them as long as they don't draw one of their 2-mana 6 damage to a green creature, but I'll take that L. I kind of say that a lot where I just like accept that cards are good against me. I think it's an important thing to do when you realize how your card can win the game by itself. It doesn't matter if your opponent plays a few 2-mana kill your card that wins the game by itself, because you have a card that wins the game by itself.
It's funny because in our set review of this new set, Michaela and I had both played like a lot of Naya and Temur and Gruel decks, and we knew unequivocally that Burning Hands was like something that I can play against Mono Red and something I can play against Elder Gargaroth. Like, let's freaking go!
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Michaela, any questions about the sideboard before we move on from you?
I've pretty much covered.
Yeah. We've also mentioned like a kind of a ton of cards to consider moving forward. Is there anything other than, I mean, we mentioned the 6-mana Planeswalker, the Planeswalker package. We mentioned different counter spells for the sideboard. We mentioned one of the cards we didn't talk about is the 4-mana 3/4 that puts a land into play untapped for your Urion. I think that card's bad, but I wanted your opinion on it.
I assume it's bad because I never played it. Is it 3/4? Or is it blue and green?
Yeah, it's a blue-green. It's blue and a green hybrid blue-green 1. It's a 3/4 that puts a forest into play untapped,
Yeah, yeah.
or a forest or an island into play untapped.
Let's just assume we're in a land where I wanted that card. I would just rather play Solemn Simulacrum.
So that is my thought too. I'm glad we had this conversation. Any cards that you have any questions about, Michaela? No? Okay. Well, you know what? It's funny. I feel like we like jumped around so much that we like covered so much of our show notes. You already answered this question. Is there a deck that you want to play against the most, Andy?
Yeah, Rakdos is easiest matchup on the planet. I remember the first 3 challenges I played with it. I beat that deck. I would describe their curve to be as good as it could possibly get, and it wasn't even close.
So
easiest matchup.
I know MTGO tends to have a slightly different meta than you might see in tournaments or even on ladder. What have you been seeing as the meta over there?
So basically, the meta's been super fluid. So it started with like a lot of that Rakdos deck, a lot of mono green, and then it switched over to Gruel, tons of Gruel, and then it really went hard. There was a week where it was all rogues, and that's why I went to 3 Pelucanos. Even so, I played a challenge and I played like the arena tournament, the arena open, and I played against rogues 6 times in like 10 matches.
That's wild.
Yeah, so, it just popped up big.
Yeah, so just to update y'all, this SCG from the last weekend, top 8 was Gruel Adventures, Teamwork Adventures, Sultai Ramp, and Naya Adventures, with 1 Rakdos Sacrifice. 1 is at control in like the top 24, 0 rogues.
Yeah, things are changing. Rogues is unplayable honestly right now because it's not quite good enough against the.
Here's the hot take that I've given on this podcast and that I've given on Twitter. Rogues is only ever good for 1 to 2 weeks, and then people decide that they want to beat Rogues, and Rogues can no longer win. And for that reason, I always include Rogues in my sideboard plans, and I just choose not to lose to the deck. And I just think that the deck, for that reason, you should not play it, and probably shouldn't play it for the rest of the standard format, unless there's a really good reason to. Okay, we've already talked about bad matchups. We talked about blue-black and rogues. Is there a bad matchup that we're missing?
Cycling.
Okay. Is there something
very bad?
Very bad. You don't think you're going to run into it? If you are expecting it, you want that 2-mana card that we talked about?
No, you want Elspeth's Nightmare.
Oh, sure. Because it kills the 0/4. That makes sense.
Well, it kills the 0/4, takes a card out of their hand, and exiles their graveyard.
Yeah.
There's 3 insane modes.
Yeah, that seems nuts though. That's a good call.
Karvek is also absolutely insane against them.
Oh, because they can't make 1/1s with the okay.
Yep.
That's good. Did we miss any other bad matchups that you want to talk about?
No, I would say that's it. Mono Green was a bad matchup for a minute, but then we all grew up and decided to start playing more than just 4 2-mana removal spells.
Hey man, I'm still a mono green player. I'm still logging in and playing mono green every once in a while on my phone, and I'm still beating Sultai. So come at me, Andy. Let's go. Andy, are you gonna play this deck this weekend?
Yeah, almost certainly. I'll probably play both standard challenges, and I don't know if you can keep me out of top 8. Good luck, because I feel like
dang,
there's
Colin
no
is
shot I'm not
shot.
making top 8.
Colin is shot, Michaela.
You might recall before I quit that I think I had messaged you on Twitter that there was like 7 slots open for the standard challenge because I had won 2 in a row, and I won the third in a row. I won the 3rd in a row.
That's too good. That's too good. Okay, let's wrap this up with questions. We have 2 questions from listeners, and we might have actually already answered some of these. So, what's the best way to sideboard with Sultai and make sideboard for specific metas? So I think this question, by the way, Andy, is specifically asking you. You know, we talked about a ton of different sideboard cards. How do you decide which ones you play, especially when you're playing like an 80-card deck?
So I'm glad you brought up the 80 card deck thing, because it does change the way you have to think about sideboarding. So you can see it in my sideboard, for example, is like 4 duress. It's because you want to see this card for sure against a lot of decks. You got to play 4 because you play so many cards. And then a lot of other things are just to back up more of the things you're already doing, to like shift your deck away from one angle and reinforce a different angle. So that's like the counter spells, the different wraths in the sideboard. So now you have more wraths because wraths are really good in a specific matchup, and you can sideboard out some counter spells that aren't as good in a specific matchup. And then the only thing that's sort of an outlier with that kind of, you're just shifting your strategy, is the 7 mana Coma, but that's just because it's a card you only want to see in the late game to take over the late game, and so it's okay to only play a couple of those. But I do think it's actually really important right now. It's also good against all the Gruel and Naya decks too.
Yeah. What's the next question, Michaela?
What adjustments are you making to Sultai to give you favorable Winota and Gruel matchups?
So I've touched on this a bit. So I think you need to play more 2-mana removal. So I think 7 is the minimum. I think going up to 8 is totally fine. And I think you need to start playing wraths that are specifically good against them and come down earlier. So while Shadow's Verdict is like insane when it's good, it's like the best wrath you could imagine. But the way decks are lining up, it's not quite good enough, because turn 5 there could be a Winota. So you need to kind of wrath before that happens, which is why I'm starting to include the 4 mana -3/-3. And one of the reasons I like that instead of Extinction Event is because Extinction Event will often leave cards behind on turn 4 that Winota will still crush you.
So yeah, I was gonna say, like, the dream is to go cultivate Shadow's Verdict against those types of decks.
Yeah,
right?
I used to play 3 Shadow's Verdict because that was the mono green meta, for example. It was like there's no better card you could possibly draw in your deck than Shadow's Verdict. But now things are kind of different now, because Winota is so good and so punishing that you have to, I think, give it a little more respect. And I don't think wrathing 4 or 3 or less is enough anymore. Like, I still include 1 because of tutors, but...
Can I give you some advice, Michaela? Is if you play Felidar Retreat, none of what he just said matters literally at all.
Yeah, and neither does the Felidar Retreat.
Yeah, because there is this binding of the old gods.
Ooh. All right.
Also, sidetrack. I had an opponent play Winota and tap to activate their chariot. That's a disgusting play for that Winota deck.
It's so sweet, right?
So gross.
It's so sweet. It's funny because I've actually thought about putting Chariot back in my Winota deck just for that play. Because I don't have any right now in my 75, but I actually do think that play specifically is hot. And it's specifically hot against Sultai. I agree.
Yeah. Andy, have you ran into that where that's happened?
Yeah, of course. That's one of the reasons Chariot's the absolute nightmare. It's so good against you. You can wrath them, and they have a 4/4.
Yeah, they
attacking you the next turn.
I agree.
And something else usually along with it.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a beating.
I want to quickly just thank the two people who gave us questions, the Wadinator and @Adrian Carr. Both, thank you so much for the questions for Andy today. I want to wrap up. First of all, Andy, thank you. It's funny. I think that one of my goals in podcasting is typically to try and make podcasts as short as possible. And I do think that we, in a lot of ways, did that today. We literally cut things because we ended up talking about them naturally. But you had so much expertise on this podcast that it just ended up being longer. And I love that and appreciate it. It's funny because, as far as the listeners are concerned, those regular listeners, they want those long podcasts. That's actually what they want. But as far as getting new listeners, you have to keep it at like a certain length. And I think that you did a really good job as our guest today of giving actually really valuable information, answering my questions, Michaela's questions, the listeners' questions. There was never a time where it really felt like anything was anything other than you just having a ton of experience here, and I really appreciated you.
Well, thank you. It's like I've done podcasting before.
Almost. I don't know, that KYT guy. I can't stand him. I hope he's listening right now and that he
And
knows.
there's some eyeballs emojis about perhaps a
I
comeback.
I already feel him texting me. I love him. He's
I think he's on vacation.
dude. He is, and also it looks great. I hope he's getting good food, and I hope that he and his wife are having a good time. Where can people find you though? If they have questions about Sultai, where can they find you?
They can find me at Andy Awkward on Twitter, and I totally love interacting with people. I get a lot of questions about decks, and I would love more followers. So yeah, at Andy Awkward on Twitter. I'm totally open to any conversations. You want to ask me about a list or ask me about something, I'm open for conversation.
Anything you want to plug?
No, I don't do any content. So all I do is post on Twitter to try and gain clout to like maybe one day use that clout for something good, I hope.
Okay. Okay. Well, here's the thing, man. I have this whole CCMG network. Maybe one day we'll do like an MTGO podcast or something that we'll have to have Andy Awkward do. But that doesn't exist yet. So check out the rest of the network. And yeah, you've got some SCG grinders over at CCMTG. You've got the #1 Popper podcast, and in my opinion, Michaela, the best limited podcast out there in Sam Black's Drafting Archetypes. Check out the rest of the network. It's super awesome. You can find the show at Arena Mythic Cast. Like us on Facebook. Leave a comment. If you're watching on YouTube and you see Andy's beautiful Raptors hat, Andy and I text quite a bit during the basketball season because we both are fans of franchises that are underappreciated, underfunded, underdogs.
Yeah, the poor Toronto Raptors. We got a feel for them.
Yeah, I mean, your best players often leave you, right? Whether it's the Vince Carters, the Kawhi Leonards, oh man, I can actually feel the pain in your body right now.
Hey, I got the chip, man. That's all I care about.
Oh man, I want one so bad.
I ugly cried by myself.
Oh man, I feel it, man. I feel it. But yeah, if you wanna follow the show, leave a comment is like the best way to do it. And whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're listening, and you want to leave a review, those are the best ways. You can find me at Spencer13H. You can also find me on Twitch soon. I do plan on streaming again once my daughter gets a little bit older. I probably won't stream Magic though, for just for transparency. It'll probably be, more Nintendo Switch games and stuff like that. But yeah, you can also find me on TikTok at Spencer13H and find the Heezy Game Media Network on TikTok at Heezy Game Media. Michaela, you can be found so many places, and they're all the same place, but I want you to say it this time.
Yeah, I'm Mythic Michaela pretty much everywhere. Mainly Twitch, Twitter, and now TikTok. So
I might put the link to your TikTok in the show notes for this show of the one that's like the one where we can't pronounce card names, because literally I saw that and I was like, I'm in this TikTok. Like, that's a TikTok. Like, this is me on the show. So give us a like, give us a sub, give us a review wherever you're listening. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you, as always, every week, Michaela.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that this podcast helped people be ready for battle next week. And I'm excited to see a full top 8 of Andy Awkward Sultai in the next MTGO challenge.